Back. So the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities has launched a new Interfaith GBV prevention and mitigation strategy. It's aimed at addressing and transforming harmful social, cultural and religious norms that contribute to gender-based violence. This initiative seeks to make faith-based communities safe spaces for all. To get us more details, we are joined by Daniela Gennrich, who is coordinator from We Will Speak Out. Daniela, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I think this is really one of the more fascinating initiatives that I've heard about in quite a while, where gender-based interventions are concerned. And your organization really was at the heart of establishing this mitigation mechanism. Talk to us about what informed it, and then we'll get into what it is exactly that the plan looks like.
Thank you so much, Naledi, and greetings to all your listeners. Yes, we launched the strategy yesterday. We Will Speak Out South Africa's secretariat to the Faith Action Collective to end gender-based violence. And we've been working for a number of years to draw together representatives or scholars, academics, and some progressive leaders from now it's 8 different faith communities to really talk through how it is that it is on our watch that gender-based violence cases seem to be getting worse and more brutal. And I suppose also recognizing that the faith sector itself has not only just not been able to really address the issues, but in some cases has also been accused of perpetrating violence. The strategy has not originated from the Department of Women, but they are a very important partner of ours. The collective itself originated in 2020, when We Will Speak Out and a number of other partners got together to say, after the lockdown, during COVID, how has this happened on our watch? And so we have, over the years, developed various strategies, various ways of working to shift some of the cultural, social norms that have been influenced by the faith sector, as well as really thinking about what would be needed to be able to contribute more effectively as the faith sector to bringing an end to the scourge in this country. And as faith leaders, we really, or as faith communities, we should be at the forefront of this as one of the key justice issues in our country.
Yeah, it's interesting that it wasn't the department that launched it, but certainly our partners. And I think that that's an important element, because it speaks to just how much buy-in you have from government. And perhaps we'll touch on that a little bit later. What I'm quite interested in is what the characteristics are of faith-based organizations that you think create an environment where you do see elevated levels of gender-based violence, particularly where it is sexual violence. What are the characteristics that you think take place there that create that sort of toxic environment in some cases?
Well, I think for one thing, most religious communities or religious institutions are extremely hierarchical, are male-dominated and patriarchal. They have traditionally used their sacred texts in particular ways that have entrenched those kinds of norms that have influenced the way one sees men and women and relationships between men and women as somehow ordained by God, as being unequal, with male dominance being justified, and female submission being taught, even in wedding ceremonies and so on. And it's been really important to demystify some of that, and also to return to some of the sacred texts and see, is that really what the sacred texts have been saying? And we've been led also by a number of theologians who've developed contextual approaches to theology, at least in the Christian sector, that have opened up a process in a way of reclaiming those sacred texts and being able to critique some of the norms and traditions that have been normalized within the faith sector, which often are influenced also by cultural norms and in turn influence the cultural norms as well. To try and break through some of that, although it is quite difficult, but it's absolutely critical. So you imagine a police officer in a police station who has been influenced by these kinds of theologies, and a survivor of domestic violence comes in and wants to lay a charge.
Yeah.
And we've seen so often the attempts to blame the victim, as it were, and go back and be obedient and submit to your husband and things will be all right. And those often are infused by those cultural norms, but also the religious norms. And so it's important that we address them.
And it's a tough task that you're taking on, because when you speak of cultural norms and religious norms, you're speaking as well about how people identify themselves, right? So to ask people to start questioning that is not going to be an easy feat. And I'm thinking now about at the launch, I think it was the Deputy Minister for Women who said, when people go to the church, they bring their hearts. So talk to me about the how, because that's going to be the critical question. I mean, there certainly is the debate and the questioning of what norms are healthy and what aren't. But the how is going to be really important, and who needs to be stepping up the effort. Because once it seems you're coming from the outside in to speak to people about the norms of their culture or religious beliefs, may not be a very welcoming space.
Absolutely, yeah. No, we don't come in from the outside. We are ourselves faith leaders in different ways, lay leaders or ordained leaders. And the space is really, it's about asking questions about whether the way things are actually helpful for anyone and everyone, and what is happening in our relationships, and working with the leaders who are concerned about what's happening in marriages and the breakdown of the communities and the families and so on, and begin to work with them to ask some of those hard questions. And yes, it is difficult. Yeah. But remember that if 87% of our population are of some sort of religious persuasion, and at least a third to 40% are themselves survivors of violence, and even among many men, it starts to make sense to people. And I think what's been really important for us is that we are not challenging the sacred texts themselves, because that's, people, as you say, they bring their heart into those. But we are opening up questions around the way they've been interpreted. And not only that, the way some scriptures have been silenced, whereas others have been forefronted out of context. Yeah. In ways to persuade a certain kind of belief systems that are also consistent with certain kinds of cultural norms. Yeah. And so also culture is, I think for people to understand that culture is, it's not static, and it's supposed to be there to be life-giving and to bring communities together and allow us to function together constructively. And so helping people to also be in safe spaces and begin to talk about their own experiences, and to begin to think about how could things be different. Yeah. Is a really important tool. And we work with often mid-level leaders. Many of them have themselves been survivors either of childhood violence or gender-based violence, and to help them to work through some of those issues for themselves. Because what happens is it's not just head knowledge. It's not just, as you say, it's not just about, changing facts and you think, well, we raise people's awareness and then things are going to change. No.
Yeah. What stands out, I think, also from the launch is the Bishop Nathi Zondo of the True Vine Community Church, who talked about how it dawned on him that every Sunday he was preaching to both survivors and perpetrators. And I thought that was quite interesting, because for the longest time, gender-based violence, for instance, is something that has not been discussed in the church, in an important discussion. And then there's going to be the issue of bringing in the outlying religious organizations that simply refuse to have that conversation. And that's going to be the trick for you, I imagine. But talk to me about the way forward, government, the importance of government buy-in, and then where you are able to say, okay, well, this is the oversight role that we can buy with the resources that we have as a result of government's buy-in.
Yes, thank you. Maybe first to say we don't have funding. We do have some private sector funding and overseas funding. Government has not supported this with funding. I think they have their own challenges in that regard. But, you know, I think the way we work in the faith sector, rightly or wrongly, is that we address issues whether there's money for it or not. And there are many things that we can also be working on the ground that don't necessarily require money. But of course, for the oversight role and we will speak out as the holding partner, we do, and we are in the process of developing a monitoring and evaluation framework that is consistent with that of the NSP. But what's important, I think, is that there are 3 pathways of work. And even yesterday afternoon, the 100 or so people that were there formed, and even online there were another 100 or so, started to form working groups to say what can be done. Let's not wait for government. Let's not wait for there to be funding. What can we do on the ground? And some task groups have already been developed. But remember, we've been working on this kind of work. We've had training initiatives, long-term programs.
So it really is, it's about the active citizenry. I am out of time, Daniela, but thank you so much for speaking to us. Daniela We Will Speak Out, and keep